friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Today's video is a fun one because it really goes hand in hand with the Meals in Jars series that we are going to be working through here on this channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. We are working through a Meals in Jars series where we are canning up complete meals in jars according to meat type. We already have chicken here or published on the channel. We are working on beef, pork, venison, soup, and then I'm also going to attempt a fifth one and try to pull together some meatless vegetarian options as well. So those will all be coming out over the next several weeks. We'll be getting those filmed. I'll be doing some grocery shopping for them and all that fun stuff. But I wanted to mention, and I have mentioned this in the chicken video, that a lot of times these meals in jars, they can just be opened up, dumped in a pot, heated up, and consumed as is. But if you have a larger family, and we're only a family of 5, so we're not even that big of a family, but 1 quart jar cannot feed 5 people. So when we're talking about meals in jars, we would have to open up about 3 quart jars to feed 5 people for a well-rounded meal that everyone would be satisfied with. But when I'm doing these meals in jars, I am not doing them thinking that I'm going to be using 3 quart jars at one time. I'm only going to be using 1 quart jar and making that work for 5 people. And one of the ways that we do that is by preparing that meal in a jar in a way that can be served over rice, potatoes, or pasta, or even something like a baked sweet potato. And one of the options for that is rice, like I mentioned, and plain rice. I have found, I don't know about y'all, but plain rice to me, when it's mixed with like a meal in a jar, I feel like that plain rice robs a lot of the flavor. Like it takes away a lot of the flavor that is really condensed inside that meal in a jar. Maybe I'm cooking it wrong, I don't know. But one of the ways that we can work around that and still stretch that quart jar of food is by seasoning our rice and creating a bunch of different styles of rice that are by itself extremely flavorful and that happen to pair beautifully with our meals in jars. So when it comes time to cooking up one of those meals in jars, we can dump it in a pot, heat it up, pop our meal in a jar rice, which you're about to see, in either on the stovetop. I like to do it in my pressure cooker. And then we have a meal that is ready to go in minutes. So today I want to bring you 5 kind of meal in a jar rice side dishes for you today. These are not going to be canned. This is all going to be dried and dehydrated goods that we're going to put up in meals in jars and vacuum seal for our pantry shelf. I'm going to be bringing you 5 recipes, but I'm going to be doing 2 jars per recipe for a total of 10 jars. Eventually we will have these published on the blog in printable form, but that's going to take me a while to accomplish. So for now, I'm just going to type up the seasoning mixes for each jar and just drop them in the description box below. And when the printable version is ready on the blog, I will come back in and link that probably in the description, and I will probably pin a comment in the top and the comment section as well. Okay, let's hop into it. By the way, if you would like help building your food storage, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for our free 1-year food storage plan. We calculated a year's supply of food for 1 person, then broke that data down into a week-by-week list of items to build your pantry on a budget. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss all of our upcoming food preservation, pantry storage, and gardening tutorials. Now back to the kitchen. For all of these recipes, I'm going to be using plain white rice, but you can absolutely use brown rice if you prefer. Just note that brown rice doesn't last as long in food storage as white rice does because it does have some oils in it that cause it to go rancid sooner. For all of these recipes, we're going to be using pint jars, and basically the recipe is 2 cups of rice, but I'm going to be doing very slightly less than 2 cups of rice just to give me enough room at the top to put all of my seasonings. So I'm not measuring with a separate 1 cup measuring cup. We all know that pints is 2 cups. So I'm just going to simply pour it until I have a little bit of room at the top left over for my seasonings. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to do a little bit more. And that is about how high I will be filling up my pint jars. Whoops, wasn't paying attention. Okay, for this first recipe, we are going to be basically doing a copycat chicken flavor of your, if you were to go to the store and buy like a Knorr rice side dish or even like a rice-a-roni, their traditional flavor is typically going to be a chickeny kind of flavored one. So that's what we're going to be repeating with our first mixture. So we need to start with 3 tablespoons of chicken broth powder. I prefer Orrington Farms. It has a cleaner ingredients list than your typical chicken broth powder. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. Just gonna push those down just a little bit. And as I go for each recipe, I'm going to look at the ingredients list and see if I need to leave myself a little bit of extra room when I go to pour my rice. But we'll make that judgment call as we go along through each of these recipes. Next, we need 1 tablespoon of dried parsley. I have all of my ingredients out here. I've got to search for them. Dried parsley. This is freeze-dried parsley from our garden, but you can absolutely use just regular dehydrated parsley. Parsley from the store, of course, is dehydrated. So 1 tablespoon of parsley. Next, we need 2 teaspoons of onion powder. 2 teaspoons of onion powder. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now these jars are going to be absolutely filled to the brim, but that is okay. We don't have to worry about head space like we do when canning. When we're working with dehydrated foods, we don't have to worry about leaving a certain amount of head space. It's totally fine. So after the 2 teaspoons of powder, we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of ground thyme. You don't have to use ground thyme. You can use just dehydrated thyme if that's what you have on hand. But I'm just going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of the ground thyme. Ground thyme is going to be more condensed flavor than your just regular dehydrated thyme if it wasn't in powdered form. So I would probably go up to 1/2 teaspoon if I were going to be using just dried thyme versus the powdered ground thyme that I'm using here. And last but not least, we just need 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. And I'm just going to shake these jars down a little bit. If you do not know how to vacuum seal a mason jar, stay tuned to the end of this video and I will be showing you how to do that. But for now, I'm just going to put the lids on. This is an excellent time to go ahead and reuse some of your old canning lids. They are perfectly fine to use for dehydrated food storage and even for vacuum sealing, as you will see later on in this video. But here is our chicken flavored rice. This next recipe is going to be a vegetable rice, and we're going to be using items like dried corn and dried peas and even some peppers. So for that reason, we do need more room at the top of our rice to be able to make room for those vegetables. So for this one, I'm going to be giving myself more space at the top and going about 1 3/4 full. Do a little bit more on that one. Okay. So for this vegetable rice, we're going to start with 2 tablespoons of dried minced onion. Dried minced onion. Oh, no, it's not baking soda. 2 tablespoons. And to that, we will add a tablespoon of our freeze-dried or dehydrated peas. Since you're going to be, when you cook up this rice, y'all know how much water you need to add when you're cooking rice, and that amount of water is going to be enough, excuse me, let me open this real quick, is going to be enough to properly rehydrate your vegetables, whether they're dehydrated or freeze-dried. Freeze-dried vegetables do rehydrate a lot faster than dehydrated, but these rice dishes, you know, they use so much water, so that's not going to be an issue. To that, I'm going to add a tablespoon of dried corn. This one's vacuum sealed too. There we go. If I had some dried carrots on hand, I would be adding a tablespoon of dried carrots too, but I don't have that on hand, so I'm going to be skipping it today. But then we are going to be doing a tablespoon of dried peppers. This is just red and green bell peppers from the garden. And I'm going to do a tablespoon of those. Man, I love the smell of freeze-dried peppers. They're so good. Okay, to that we're going to add a tablespoon of our dried parsley. And next we will add 1 teaspoon of salt. You can use whatever kind of salt you would like here. This is the Redmond's real salt. Did I say half tablespoon? No, 1 teaspoon. Okay, 1 teaspoon of that. 1 teaspoon of salt. And last but not least, we're going to do a half a teaspoon of pepper. And I'm going to go very light on that half teaspoon, just because I don't want to accidentally make this too spicy for my kiddos. And there we have our vegetable rice. This next rice is a Mexican style rice, and it doesn't have any of the bulky vegetables like we had in our vegetable rice, but it does have almost a 1/4 cup of tablespoons worth of seasonings in them. So we do still need to leave about 3/4 full. Put a little bit more in this one. About like that for our Mexican rice. Okay, to start, we need a tablespoon of tomato powder. We have a video on how to make tomato powder, even if you don't have fresh tomatoes. And I will link that in the description box below. But you can certainly buy it from the store, and I will link just a place where you can just buy it straight up as well. Okay, so after that, we're going to add a tablespoon of chopped onions, and I'm just going to be using my dried minced onions for this. You can absolutely do dehydrated, like whole chopped onions, but we just need 1 tablespoon of those. Next, we need a tablespoon of our chicken bouillon, or a chicken broth powder. I'm usually pretty liberal with the chicken broth powder and the beef broth powder, meaning a little bit more. I'm usually doing like a heaping tablespoon when I add those. Next is a tablespoon of our dehydrated peppers once again, or freeze-dried, whatever you have on hand. This is these rice mixes in a jar. They're just a fantastic way to put up all of your dehydrated foods and use them. If you're someone who has gotten into dehydrating your foods and you're trying to figure out how do I use all of my dried ingredients, these mixes are an excellent way to put them to great use. Okay, after that we are going to add a teaspoon of garlic powder. Where is the garlic powder? Here it is. A teaspoon of garlic powder. And a teaspoon of taco seasoning. There it is. This is homemade taco seasoning. We have that on the blog as well, and I will link that in the description box below. But you can certainly use packets from the store, but we just need 1 teaspoon. Next is half a teaspoon of salt. Followed by half a teaspoon of cumin. Someone asked recently on a YouTube video where I get all of my bulk spices. So we created a bulk spices list in our Amazon storefront. So you can go, I can drop the link to that, and you'll be able to find all of the bulk spices that we use in one place. So I'll link that in the description box below for all of these spices. Next, we need a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. There it is. And that's it. 1/4 teaspoon of pepper is our last ingredient. This is a Mexican flavored rice, and this will be excellent for serving over using our meals in jars when we're going to be doing a Mexican or a chipotle beef. I believe we're doing a Mexican venison, and we've already done a taco chicken, and all of those would be delicious poured over these Mexican rice jars. This next recipe is beefy rice, and we don't need to leave much headspace at all on this one, so I'm going to be filling it almost a full 2-cup whey. 2-cup whey, that was kind of a weird way of saying that. I'm going to fill it up almost all the way. Whoops, too much. Okay, that will do good. So for our beefy rice, we need 2 tablespoons of our beef bouillon. And I also use Orrington Farms, but I will say the beef broth powder doesn't have as clean ingredients as the chicken broth powder, but it's still cleaner than the regular beef bouillon. But I'm a little disappointed that they didn't make their beef broth powder as clean as their chicken broth powder, and I'm not sure why. So 2 tablespoons of the beef bouillon, 1 tablespoon of our dried parsley again. This is one reason why we grow a lot of parsley. If y'all have seen past garden tours and such, you may have wondered, why do I grow so much parsley? I'm just kind of breaking off some of this beef bouillon here. But this is one reason. It's because we not only season our meals a lot with parsley, we especially love it in our like chicken and dumplings and things like that. But a lot of our meals in jars, our dehydrated meals in jars, and our dehydrated side dishes are seasoned heavily with parsley. So that's one reason why we grow a lot of it. So 1 tablespoon of parsley. Parsley is also a star in our homemade cream of soup mix that we use to make all of our cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, cream of celery, all that. Pretty much all of the recipes have a little bit of parsley in them. Okay, so after that, we're going to do 1 teaspoon of onion powder. I buy all these spices in bulk and then just store them in mason jars and refill them as I need them. We do a whole lot of cooking around here, and it's just a lot cheaper for us to buy them that way. So then last but not least, is a 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. Again, I'm going to be using ground thyme, so I'm using a 1/4 teaspoon. If you're using just dried thyme, you might want to bump it up to 1/2 teaspoon. So a 1/4 teaspoon of ground thyme, or 1/2 teaspoon of just regular dried thyme. And that is it. That is our beefy rice mixture. Now this is going to be an excellent base for all of the beef meals in jars that we will be doing soon, and that might even be published at the time of this video is published, I'm not sure. But any of your beef meals in jars would be delicious served over this beefy rice. For this next recipe, it's going to be an Italian rice, and we need about 4 to 5 tablespoons at the top, so I'm going to leave a little generous 1/4 cup at the top, which means approximately 1 3/4 cups of rice for this one. Okay, so to start out, we need 1 or 2 tablespoons? Let's see, 2 tablespoons of tomato powder. And you can absolutely do this particular recipe without the tomato powder. But the Italian rice is generally going to be served with other Italian type flavors. And to me, those all just go really well with tomato powder. But you can leave it out if you would like. We're going to follow that with 2 tablespoons of Italian seasoning. You can make up your own Italian seasoning mix if you would like. But we're going to do 2 tablespoons of that. Next, we need 1 tablespoon of crushed basil. I'm going to be using some of our dried basil from the garden. Is this vacuum sealed? Yep. Okay. Remember, if you don't know how to vacuum seal a mason jar, stay tuned. I will show you how to do that at the end of this video. I'm just going to crush it up. So this is basil that we dehydrated, and a lot of it is in big clumps, so I just need to crush that real quick. Okay, a tablespoon of crushed dried basil. Smells so good. You crush it, the smell is so strong. Okay, to that we will add a teaspoon of garlic powder. And last but not least, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground thyme. Again, bump that up to 1/2 teaspoon if you are using regular thyme. And that's it. There's our Italian thyme. It really features Italian basil and tomato type of flavors. Now I mentioned that I was only going to be doing 5 recipes, but I'm going to do one more. Let's consider it a bonus. And that's because it is kind of an experiment. I haven't tried it yet, but we grew, where is it? Where's my lime basil? There it is. We grew lime basil for the first time this year. Lime basil is basil, but it has an extremely citrusy flavor profile that's very similar to limes. And I grew it this year because I wanted to see how citrusy it was, and I was blown away at how strong the citrusy flavor was. Now there is a common like rice in jar, recipe that's called a lemon herb blend, or just an herb blend of rice. And we've made that before and our family did not love it. It's a mixture of lemon pepper, there might have been some lemon powder in there, and just a whole bunch of different herbs. And our family did not like it at all. But a kind of lemony, herby type rice does pair well with a lot of different recipes. So I'm going to try doing just lime basil as the seasoning in one of these rice mixes. I'm hoping that it will kind of be a good substitute for that lemony herb rice that our family doesn't like. So I'm just going to kind of load that in there, about 1/4 cup. But we freeze dried this, but you can just do it in a dehydrator as well. It makes fantastic tea, one of our absolute favorite teas. We just grew it this year for the first time, so we just discovered it this year, but it was delicious and became a favorite very quick. So I am just going to be trying this lime basil rice as well, and I'm hoping that it is delicious. Okay, let me show you how to vacuum seal these mason jars, and then I will talk to you, as I'm doing that, I'll talk to you about how to prepare these jars when you're ready to serve. Okay, there are actually several ways that you can vacuum seal a mason jar, and we have an all things vacuum sealing video, so I will link that in the description box below as well, but I'm just going to show you the 2 of my favorite ways to seal it quick without having to drag out a bunch of equipment. The first way, well, either way, you're going to need an accessory top. This is the Food Saver brand. They now have multiple other brands have now made them, but you're going to need one for regular mouth and one for wide mouth. I'm going to do this wide mouth jar first. We're just going to set that over the jar till it's nice and seated. And this first method I'm going to show is using a brake bleeder pump. Yes, you heard that correctly. It is a mechanics tool. There was some confusion recently on a recent video, but this is a mechanics tool. And we're just going to put the needle right there in the center hole of that top. And we're going to pump until this needle right here stops moving, which is typically, goodness, I can't get it in the camera, which is typically going to be in between 15 and 20. Okay, it's no longer moving. You kind of heard that release there. So the little button in the center of the lid is pressed down. We can do a test by holding it only by the lid and it doesn't fall off. I'm not going to pop open that seal to prove it, but just trust me, it is vacuum sealed. So before we move into the next method, I want to talk to you about how to prepare these jars. You will prepare these jars like you do anything of any kind of bucket of rice. A lot of people do it on their stovetop. I have since switched in recent years to doing it in my Instant Pot because I just find it a lot easier, and I tend to not burn it and scorch the bottom as often as I do on the stovetop. But you will just, if you're, let's say we're doing the pressure cooker and Instant Pot method, when you go to cook this, you will simply open the jar, dump it into your Instant Pot, add about 1 and 1.5 jars of water. So that's about 3 cups of water. A pint jar is 2 cups, so 1.5 is going to be about 3 cups of water. If you want to, you can add a tablespoon of butter as well, just to add a little bit more flavor and kind of creaminess to the rice, but sometimes, or actually a lot of times, I just kind of leave that out. But 1 pint jar to 1.5 pint jars of water, which is equal to 3 cups of water. And then I will pressure cook it for 7 minutes. After 7 minutes is typically, it's typically perfectly done at that point. If for whatever reason I were to open the lid and it wasn't done, I would simply let it go for another 2 minutes. But 7 minutes tends to be that good spot where everything is cooked nicely. I do a quick release if I'm kind of in a hurry, but if I'm not in a hurry, I will allow for a natural release on that Instapot. Either way, I find quick release, natural release, either way, I find that it doesn't really change the texture or the, how well the rice turned out. They're both the same. Okay, I'm going to show you very quickly the other method that has quickly become my favorite, other than the brake bleeder pump, and that is just a handheld sealer like this one. This is the WeVac. I'll have it linked in the description box below. But you simply line up that hole with the hole on the top and push the button until it beeps. People always ask me how long will these last on the shelf, and I will tell you that I have a hard time giving a hard and fast number for how long these will last on the shelf, because if you look at the ingredients, in a lot of the videos that we do, if you look at the ingredients, they are all fully dried. If a food is fully dried and it's not high in fat, it should never go bad in the sense of going rancid or spoiling to the point of making you sick. If a food that is non-fatty has been thoroughly dried properly, the only thing it's going to do over time is possibly it's going to lose nutrients over time and possibly get a little bit stale. Neither of those two methods of going bad, quote unquote, is equal to spoiling and making you sick. So in that regard, I consider these as having an almost indefinite shelf life, especially being vacuum sealed. Vacuum sealing this jar just ensures that I don't even have to think about how quickly I need to use this jar. If I were to not vacuum seal this jar, I would want to use this mix within 6 months. Remember, it is just dried ingredients or freeze-dried ingredients that we have used. But since I have vacuum sealed this jar, and considering what I just said about the prerequisites of making sure it's dried thoroughly and all of that, if you take all of that into consideration, and I have vacuum sealed this jar, I consider this something that is not going to go bad in my pantry. If it sits there for 5 years, it's still going to be good in 5 years. Now, everyone needs to make a judgment call based on the smell test, the eye test. What does it look like? What does it smell like? Make that judgment call for your family. But I just wanted to kind of give you my point of view on fully and thoroughly and properly dehydrated foods. They're not going to spoil and go rancid. They will simply lose and degrade in nutrients over time and possibly have a little bit of a staleness to them. I have never even experienced a stale type taste coming out of a vacuum sealed, homemade, dried goods. But that's just me. Okay, y'all, I hope that was helpful to you, and we will see you next time. Bye.